What was the result of pushing talk show host too far with Melania Trump? The answer sent shockwaves round the world. Camera panned across the excited live studio audience in Los Angeles. It was a very brightly lit studio set with unmistakable energy to a popular primetime talk show. Home viewers were expecting that usual mix of humor and cutting political commentary by the host. Alex Brooks was a liberal figure known for grilling his guests. Seated confidently, his polished grin framed by the studio lights, he seemed a man who would be perfectly in his element for a routine night's show until it wasn't. And now, Alex began, his tone carrying a hint of mischief, "We have a very special guest, someone you'd never guess would set foot on this stage." The crowd murmured, curiosity rippling through the room. Then, as if orchestrated for maximum impact, Melania Trump emerged from backstage. Dressed in a sleek ivory suit, her posture exuded elegance and strength. The audience gasped, caught off guard by the unannounced appearance. Some clapped hesitantly, while others exchanged puzzled glances. Alex himself seemed momentarily thrown off, though he quickly masked it with his signature smirk. Melania approached the host's chair with calm confidence. "Thank you for having me," she said, her accent soft but deliberate. The audience's mix of intrigue and skepticism set in for what ended up being the night that wouldn't be remembered. The backdrop was set, but certainly no one, not even Alex, could say what would begin to transpire. The true fireworks began whenever the conversation shifted to the intimate. Predictably so, the interview first started with him being as lovable as himself. He leaned back in his chair, crossed one leg over the other, and gave Melania a polite smile. "So, Melania, it's been quite a journey for you since your time in the White House. What's life like now?" Melania met his gaze without flinching. "Life is peaceful," she replied, steady. "I focus on my family, my projects, and helping children through my initiatives." Alex nodded, but his eyes glimmered with a trace of mischief. He wasn't here to offer an easy conversation, and everyone in the audience knew it. Still, Melania's calm demeanor seemed to disarm him, at least for a moment. The crowd listened intently as she spoke about her post-White House work, from supporting underprivileged children to advocating for mental health awareness. "Interesting," Alex said after a pause, "but let's be honest. Many people have criticized you for remaining silent on controversial topics during your time as First Lady. How do you respond to that?" The room seemed to hold its breath, anticipating how she would handle the pointed question. Melania, however, kept her cool, her hands placed calmly on her lap. "I think actions speak louder than words," she said matter-of-factly. "It's easy to talk, but harder to make a real difference. I focus on what I can do, not on what others expect me to say." The air seemed to shift ever so slightly. Alex leaned forward a little, his face sharpening. It was obvious he planned to go further. The air thickened when Alex brought up a subject no one thought she would mention. His smile broadened as he tapped his pen against the armrest. "Actions speak louder than words. Interesting philosophy. But don't you think some moments demand words, especially when the stakes are so high?" His tone had shifted, carrying a subtle edge as though he was testing the waters before diving deeper. Melania tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "I think people have their parts. My part was to help my husband and my country in my own way." Alex furrowed his brow. "And helping him meant being quiet, even when his words or actions were divisive?" A few gasps ran through the audience. The question wasn't merely bold, it was flammable. Alex relaxed into his chair, crossing his arms, clearly waiting for a defensive response. The room hummed with expectation, the tension almost palpable. But Melania didn't bat an eyelash. Instead, she let the silence sit there for a moment, her eyes never leaving his. "Division has always existed," she said finally, her voice as soothing as ever. "Blaming one person for it is easy, but it doesn't solve the problem. I choose to focus on unity, not blame." The audience murmured in response. Alex appeared momentarily taken aback, but he regained his composure quickly. Fair point, he yielded, but speaking of unity, there are rumors, controversies, things people want to hear from you directly, for example, your marriage. The room let out a collective gasp. The air seemed to thicken as the questioning became so personal, crossing into realms few would expect or want, their marriage. Melania's face remained impassive, but for an instant there was a flicker in her eyes, a spark that said she was ready for this. But what came next turned the conversation into something no one could have anticipated. Alex leaned in, his voice lowering just enough to make the moment feel intimate yet charged. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Melania. Many people have asked for answers regarding your choices, your silence during some of the most turbulent times in history, and even your relationship with the former president. Here to set the record straight. The audience was literally on the edge of their seats, whispering among themselves, this was what they had been waiting for, the confrontation that promised fireworks. Alex's smile grew, as he sensed that he was soon to corner his guest. But Melania did not take the bait. She sat up, straightening her posture, and her face calmed but was commanding. I am here to speak for myself, she said sharply, her accent carrying a subtle sharpness, not for rumors, not for stories made by people who do not know me. Alex opened his mouth to interrupt, but Melania wasn't done. Her voice took on a steamroller quality, cutting through the air like a razor. Everyone has opinions, she said, her words deliberate, but opinions are not facts. I know who I am, and I know what I stand for. The rest is just noise. The crowd held its collective breath, absorbing the weight of her words. Even Alex, the veteran host whose quick wit could shift conversations at a moment's notice, seemed for a moment flummoxed for an answer. His smirk dissolved into what almost became a look of genuine shock. Melania's eyes scanned the crowd. It is easy to judge someone from the outside, she continued, harder to look inside yourself and ask why you feel the need to judge. The room broke into applause, people standing up. Alex, who was still healing, tried to regain control. Well, he stammered, that's, quite a perspective. But surely you understand why people feel, Melania interrupted him with a small, polite smile. I understand more than you think, she said. The applause rose louder, but Alex wasn't done yet, and his next move raised the stakes even higher. Alex leaned forward, his pen now resting forgotten in his hand. His voice grew sharper, as if he dared Melania to falter. You know, Melania, there's something people have always been curious about. How do you reconcile your platform of unity and kindness with some of the more, let's say, controversial statements your husband made, statements that many say divided the nation? The room fell into an uneasy quiet, all eyes darting between Alex and Melania. It was the kind of question designed to corner someone, to put them on the defensive. The audience braced themselves, expecting either a deflection or an outburst. But Melania, ever composed, didn't miss a beat. She placed her hands gently on her lap, her expression calm yet firm. People see what they want to see, she began. My work has always been about helping children, promoting kindness, and showing respect. I cannot control what others say or do, but I can control how I act, and I choose kindness. Alex raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by what he perceived as a vague response. But surely, he pushed, there were moments when you could have spoken out, taken a stand. Melania's eyes narrowed just slightly, her voice cutting through his interruption. Taking a stand is not always about shouting the loudest, she said. Sometimes it is about staying true to your values, even when it is not popular. The audience broke into applause, some even cheering. Alex, momentarily stunned, seemed unsure how to proceed, but his hesitation was brief. He leaned back, offering a small laugh as though to regain his footing. Fair enough, he said, but let's not ignore the fact that silence can also be seen as complicity. Melania tilted her head, her expression cool but with a glint of something sharper. And words without action can be seen as hypocrisy, she said, her tone even but firm. The room exploded, Now the energy in the room electrified the crowd as the audience reacted in both shock and awe. Alex's face changed, his confidence was visibly wavering. This was not going at all how he had anticipated it would. But the moment that truly quieted the room was still to come. Alex adjusted his tie, clearly searching for a way to regain control of the conversation. The tension in the room was thick, every word feeling like it carried the weight of the world. Finally, he leaned forward and delivered the question that no one thought he would dare to ask. "Melania," he started, his voice intentionally measured, "do you ever regret marrying Donald Trump?" A collective gasp was heard in the audience. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed stunned, their movements briefly hesitating. The question wasn't just bold, it was deeply personal. All eyes turned to Melania, waiting for her reaction. She didn't say a word for a moment. She sat there stone still, her expression unreadable. The silence was just long enough to be unsettling. Everyone in the room became uncomfortable, including Alex. Then she spoke, her voice calm but piercing. "Regret is for people who don't take responsibility for their choices," she said. "I know who I married. I know the life I chose, and I stand by it, not because it is easy, but because it is mine." The crowd clapped louder, more in harmony than before. Some people stood up, applauding with admiration. Alex blinked for the first time that night, his composure cracking. He opened his mouth to speak, but Melania wasn't done. "We live in a world where it is easy to criticize from the sidelines," she continued, her voice unwavering. "But the truth is, you cannot understand someone's life unless you have lived it. And I do not owe anyone an explanation for my choices." The applause became deafening as though to prove that everybody in the auditorium siding was with her. Alex leaned back in his chair, visibly humbled, his earlier bravado nowhere to be seen. But it's what happened after the cameras stopped that shocked them the most. As they broke to commercial, the studio audience was a whirlwind of chatter and awe and disbelief. Melania had not only survived Alex's attack but turned the tables. The producers in the back worked frantic, some typing furiously on their computers, others into headsets repeating slurs about just how virally explosive that segment might become. Meanwhile, on stage Alex leaned over to Melania, his earlier confidence replaced by something more subdued. "I'll admit," he said with a half-smile, "I didn't expect you to handle that so gracefully." Melania regarded him with a polite smile, her tone measured. "I don't play games, Alex. I speak the truth, and that is enough." The comment hung in the air, Alex caught off guard by her sincerity. The host, once so dominating, now seemed abashed. "Fair enough," he muttered, offering a nod. Backstage, staff and guests whispered as Melania passed by, drawing attention everywhere she went. Some were eager to compliment her poise while others could just not get used to her commanding nature without raising her voice. She thanked them gracefully, however didn't linger. As she stepped out of the building, a swarm of reporters and photographers had already waited for her outside. Questions bombarded her from all directions. "Melania, do you think Alex went too far? Were you prepared for this interview? Do you have anything else to say?" She stopped briefly, looking toward the flashing cameras. "I said what needed to be said," she stated flatly, "no more." And with that, she went into her car and drove away, leaving a crowd buzzing behind her. Next morning, she had ignited a nationwide debate nobody could ignore. Clips of the interview spread like wildfire on social media by dawn. The hashtags #MelaniaSpeaks and #Melania vs Alex were trending all over the world. People on both sides of the political spectrum chimed in, dissecting every word, every gesture, every nuance of the exchange. Cable news networks replayed the moment on a loop, with pundits arguing over whether Alex had crossed a line or if Melania's responses were a masterclass in grace under pressure. Some called her poised and unshakable, others claimed she had sidestepped accountability. Opinion aside, one thing was clear, she had captured the nation. Debates did not stop at television. Coffee shop conversations, discussions at work, and family dinner tables buzzed with questions about the limits of professionalism and personal respect in interviews. Can an interviewer truthfully seek truth without crossing lines? Is it right to pry on someone's private life? In the midst of all this hullabaloo, Melania released no further statements. She let her words from the interview speak for themselves, a decision that only fueled the public's fascination. Her silence was not evasive but deliberate, a reminder that sometimes restraint can make the loudest impact. In the weeks that followed, Alex Brooks addressed the interview on his show, acknowledging that he may have underestimated his guest. "I'll say this," he told his audience. "Whether you agree with her or not, Melania Trump knows how to command a room." For some, the big takeaway from the gala was not actually about Melania and Alex but actually about the larger takeaway, a lesson in overcoming adversity with grace. In the age of passionate debates and ear-biting sound bites, her very composure set an example about rising above the chaos. As the headlines fade, one thing remains clear: moments like these remind us of the power of measured words, the strength of self-awareness, and the importance of standing firm in one's truth. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and share, and subscribe to more thought-provoking stories. Until next time, stay curious and stay kind.